America and the world where poverty and world hunger is forever eradicated. Man, woman, and child has health care without worry, where the cost of college or technical training is no longer a concern, and where every single American retires wealthy. In the time available, I'll explain as much as I can about the mechanism by which we will create the wealth, why it is affordable, even profitable, and how we will protect the money supply from inflation. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll challenge anyone who does. The role of government in birth loop programs is minimized. The cost, scope, and size of government is reduced with each program. Our federal budget will decline, and our almost insolvent debt will reverse to a surplus. At the heart of every program is voluntary contract law, which shifts each of these new societal programs away from government and back to the forces of capitalism and free enterprise. Government's role will change from all the things it currently attempts to do to that of a clearinghouse for loans and a little more. These programs have similarities with each other. There's 7 of them, and though none are exactly alike, this first program, Birth Loop, meant to eradicate poverty from our nation once and for all, will at least give you an idea of the foundation of the other Birth Loop programs. Essentially what happens is this: the government will borrow money for these programs that it will in turn lend. It will schedule its own repayment for the same time it is to be repaid, making its cost a wash, except for a very small interest payment. Birth Loop, the efficient use of money. Here we go. With the birth of each new citizen, our government will open a bank account for that child and put money in it that is to be repaid after 25 years. The bank, not the child, will have complete authority over the use of that money, along with the responsibility of paying it back. With this one unusual stipulation: when they pay the government back, they will make the interest payment of $2,000 each year into the child's account, the interest payment. Upon turning 25, every American will start life with a nest egg of $50,000 free and clear to be used in any legal way they see fit. Look what happens next. Upon repayment by the banks to the government will now reissue or recycle that payment, just given them by the banks, back to the banks, to be used a second time for the 26th generation of people. We will keep using the same money over and over again in an infinite loop, replacing our current open-ended welfare models. A second loan program for $25,000 could start next year for every American turning 25. This is a second program. Beginning next year, every single American citizen can begin their lives with a $25,000 head start, and in 25 years, when the Birth Loop program kicks in, $75,000 head start. Each 25-year-old, upon receiving these monies, we've amassed the money. Now let's break the second prong of the poverty cycle. Each 25-year-old, upon receiving these monies, will immediately come off welfare assistance for a minimum of 1 year. That would pay for everything by itself, saving $70 billion in taxes every single year this one program is implemented. Money supply or inflation is also easily protected, partly through this $70 billion reduction in the federal budget, partly through an upgrade of our national credit rating, which will save hundreds of billions of dollars every year. But if I didn't tell you anything else, know this: each year, the growth of our federal budget is equal to the size of any one of these programs. So if you're concerned about money hitting in and creating inflation, it's simply not. That's the money hitting it. That's an outlay. It's not the cost, but it simply won't affect our inflation. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know I'm out of time.
Greetings, Libertarians. My name is Jared Michael Reed. I'm from California. I'm an engineer, patent lawyer, military scientist, bullion banking, finance, market analyst, and geopolitical analyst. I've analyzed the socioeconomic fabric of our society, irrespective of political party or political orientation. I've determined the systemic problems facing the country, their causes, and have devised a comprehensive solution set. Following on, I've devised a political strategy in connection with the comprehensive solution set, along with a presidential platform and pledge, so as to appeal to 90% of Americans. I am the only Libertarian Party candidate who can and would win the presidency, and that is guaranteed. The last nominee of the party lost. Over the last 4 years as titular head, the party's been stagnant with membership declining. That is failure. A definition of insanity is to do something over again and expect a different result. There is another candidate who believes that presidential blog should be run for profit, shamelessly profiteering on libertarianism. There's another candidate here today who indicates that he is an anarchist, yet seeks the presidency. The Libertarian Party does not need a stagnator, it does not need a profiteer, and it doesn't need an oxymoron to pander a narrow political perspective and lose and keep the Libertarian Party marginalized. I can appeal to 90% of the American electorate and would win. And let me give you an example here. Many object to the war on drugs, and many espouse sovereignty. But I want you to trust me. America is not ready to legalize Kool-Aid in Jonestown. You have to slowly work up to it. Political changes are not done in a step function. You've got to get a man who can win and start the ball rolling towards increased liberties and freedoms in our life now. If you want a 1,000-fold increase in your membership, if you want to win the White House, if you actually want to restore the Constitution and the Republic, if you want economic prosperity, if you want global peace, if you really want increase in liberties and freedoms in your life, I am your only guy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates. We are now going to have the panelists.
Before we begin, we will have an opportunity for members of the audience to put questions to the candidates. We will ask you to write them down. If you would like to have a piece of paper for them to provide a question, please do so. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
We'll have each panelist ask a question to the candidate. We have 1 minute for the response. So when I stand up, that's when your 30 seconds is starting to wind down. So if you want to start.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming to Virginia, for coming to Richmond. For those of you who are not from around here, welcome. My name is Brian Cannon. I work on a redistricting reform issue, but as a millennial, I have an interest in what you guys think about this latest, and it's an ongoing thing, but the latest regarding Apple versus the FBI, right? And there's a significant issue coming up in there with regards to the government's power over our private industries. And even Governor Johnson, you mentioned a cyber war. A lot of the defense in that involves our private sector infrastructure, which is a good bulk of where our cyber technologies and our cyber infrastructure lay. Getting the Department of Defense to work with those folks is hard. How do you all, as libertarians, propose a path forward for limited government, but yet a lot of cooperation with the private sector here that may or may not, such as in Apple's case, really want to cooperate with us?
And everyone has an opportunity to answer the question. No particular order, unless you want to go in order.
As a consumer, I'd like to look out into the future and see and foresee. And what I foresee is that the fight will escalate, and there's a chance at some point in time that the government will be able to open these phones and see into our data and that sort of thing. And at that point, our privacy is very lost. I would like for us as individuals to have our privacy, and the government not particularly win this battle. But in the event that they did, as a consumer, I would like to ask Apple to be thinking beyond where we are now into the situation that if the government ever does open their phone, that the rest of us have some sort of a software barrier to the clouds, that they can see only that phone and the things that affect it, and not the rest of our privacy.
So the situation with Apple versus the FBI, or the FBI versus Apple, depending on how you read the headlines are talking about one specific situation, and they want you to focus only on that one situation, not the dozen other situations where the FBI currently has taken Apple to court to try to force Apple to create a backdoor. The FBI publicly is saying, no, this is about one phone, and it's not a program. We just need you to create software that allows us to hack into this one phone. I'm sorry, but that's called a master key. To where, let's suppose for a moment that instead of Apple, it were the company that sells fire safes at Home Depot. And somebody has something stored in their fire safe, and the FBI says, we need to look into this fire safe. Company that made this fire safe, we need you to give us a backdoor that allows us to crack into every fire safe that you had made. How many people would want to buy a fire safe from that company if they complied? I don't think anybody would. Apple should not comply, no backdoors, because if the feds can get in the back door, a hacker can get in the back door, and then nothing that you have is secure.
Apple should not comply. The government is asking for the key to one cell phone. If in fact that is the case, if in fact that is possible, and the fact that a court has said that that they can and should provide one key, then that makes a lot of sense. But according to Apple, that is not the case. I'm going to side with Apple on believing that Apple is telling the truth here, and that is that they have provided a master key. The government is asking the key to your hotel room, or the government is asking Apple for the key to your hotel room, but Apple is saying they're going to have to provide a master key to the entire hotel. And so I side with Apple on this. If they provide that master key, I think that immediate ramifications could be the death sentence for a lot of Chinese citizens because of what that master key will reveal for citizens in China and what they have been doing. Talking about a cyber war, I'm thinking more in terms of cutting off the funding to Islamic terrorism, and I don't know if that really involves backdoor. Maybe I misspoke on that.
Okay, I certainly support Apple. They have committed no crime. Why should they be forced to undermine their own systems? And certainly, asking, this is the wrong group to be asking that question. Libertarians, as a matter of principle, are opposed to the government. So we don't want the government, violating whatever we're doing as far as freedom. On a larger issue, I'm not a technical person. I don't really enjoy getting into all the details of cyber security and all that kind of thing. However, it's obvious to me from the forest and the trees that we have to do more to advance. In other words, many people are calling for more advancements in our hardware and software because others are catching up. It's kind of like the paper chase, except it's the cyber chase, and you've got to keep on investing. Otherwise, eventually, and I'm not calling for necessarily government investing, private people can invest, but the early bird gets the worm, and the biggest computer can hack the smaller computer. So, this doesn't end, but if we want to be ahead of the game, we have to move forward and try to make investments through private or public assets.
Let's go back a couple hundred years and put on our thinking caps. We have the police walking the beat, peering into people's windows, in public view, monitoring the situation, and if things come to light, probable cause is breached, that gives the government authority to prevent crime, international terrorism, to act. The NSA with their data mining is a dragnet that exceeds the need. A nodal analysis in tracking terrorist communications would reduce the amount of data mining 99% and reduce the invasion. The government needs these capabilities. The problem is the lack of congressional oversight over intelligence gathering so as to restrict it to legitimate probable cause. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, if you could hold the mic as close to your mouth as possible. I see the people in the back saying they can't hear. So just if you want to make sure that they can hear in the back. So next question, 1 minute each response.
I heard a candidate earlier mention that the war against terrorism and ISIS is not a military battle, but more of a financial means of dealing with that. With the majority of America seeing our military government looking for them for protection against this terrorist threat, would be your response on how we should deal with the terrorism and ISIS as a whole? And on top of that, because I'm concerned myself, we've dealt with ISIS, what are we going to do to continue to deal with the next terror group that replaced ISIS, just as ISIS replaced Al-Qaeda?
Well, so I think that our military interventions have made things worse, not better. And without exception, whenever we involve ourselves, whether it's militarily, whether it's financial aid, in toppling over one despot, that we replace the old horrible despot with a new despot that ultimately is as bad or oftentimes worse. So let's contain. And first of all, let me be very clear. Look, government is to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations, foreign governments that would do us harm. So if we're attacked, we're going to attack back. But we should follow a strategy of containing what's happening over in the Middle East. That doesn't involve putting boots on the ground, doesn't involve dropping bombs, doesn't involve drone attacks that kill thousands of people and make the situation worse. And by make the situation worse, wanting more people to take revenge against the United States. So let's just be smart about it. Let's contain it over there and have very judicious use of our military, and the prerequisite for that would be an attack, a direct attack.
The global war on terror is really just a bar fight with bombs instead of fist. What do I mean by that? Somebody threw a punch where we don't remember who, we don't remember when, but somebody threw a punch and somebody else threw a punch, and then pretty soon everybody in the bar is throwing punches, and everybody's saying, I want this to stop, but they keep throwing punches. That is the global war on terror. The U.S. military lobs bombs, somebody else lobs a bomb, and this really comes down to what is essentially called bomb science, or the rules of bar fight. Someone gets hit, you get mad. You hit somebody, they get mad, they throw a punch, they hit somebody else, and it continues and it continues. You don't win a bar fight by continuing to throw fist. You don't win a war against people that are mad that you're bombing them by continuing to bomb them. You end it by stopping the fight. Just stop the fighting. Stop the funding. Stop funding, stop fighting, bring all the troops home now.
Governor Johnson was right in that we need to take a smart approach to this. I don't understand how we've been at this war for decades now, nearly, and just the other day I saw them do some of the most effective things I've ever seen since the war has started. We're fighting a bunch of mercenaries, and what they finally did was go after the oil supply, and they went after the financial route and stopped their mercenaries from being paid. And as that happened, they had a very real effect. So, and generally, ISIS is also hated by the entire world community. I just can't imagine a worse. So the entire world will go against them. In general, with ISIS, we have to defend ourselves. They're just a monstrous organization. But beyond that, what I would really like to see us do is spread our values throughout the world, American values throughout the world with trickle-up economics. I'd like to see us end world hunger, provide health care throughout the world, and rebuild the impoverished country's infrastructure. I'd like to see that be the role of America.
ISIS is not primarily a terrorist group. What is going on is a world power play. After the U.S. mobilized the Western Ukrainians and took out the Russian pipelines into Europe, Russia tried to go through the southern path through Turkey. The object is to bypass the neocons in D.C. to be able to supply Europe with Russian oil. ISIS is allied with the United States, feeding it arms, Israeli logistics, the Saudi Arabia armed forces, and Turkey buying oil, Saudi Arabia massing an army, Israel intelligence. This is about century-old battle between the Shia and the Sunnis being played by the Russians and the Americans. The object here by the Americans is to block Iranian oil being piped up into the Mediterranean to support the Moscow sphere of influence versus piping up Sunni Gulf oil into the Mediterranean to supply Europeans for the economic competition and suppression of the Russian oil industry. And when you hear people talk about ISIS being the threat, Trump is going to bomb ISIS, you got no clue as to what is really going on.
That's time.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent question. I think this is a question that goes to the heart of the presidential campaign in 2016. Certainly the Republican and Democrats have indicated what they're planning to do, and they're certainly planning to continue the war, however you want to describe it, and generally libertarians are opposed to the Republican and Democratic actions, military involvement in the Middle East. I just want to ask my fellow candidates and everyone else, I keep talking about first freedom. I've dubbed my campaign First Freedom. Now, of course, I'm talking, for me, I've coined that because I want to talk just about the First Amendment. So the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law establishing or prohibiting religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition. So who understands that campaign as really the foundation of America, and it should be the foundation of America's foreign policy? Is that damaging? Is that threatening? Is that too difficult? Because how in the world did America get aligned with some of the richest oil, theocracies, dictatorships in the world? And you mentioned the term mercenary. I think under Cheney and Bush that the United States becoming the world sheriff is the world's mercenary. What are we defending? Who flew out on 9/11 the next day out of America? The Saudi family. Bush and Cheney got them out of here. So are we still, okay, we've still got a lot of questions to answer. Thank you.
I'm Sandy Sanders. I'm a blogger for Virginia Right. Can't hear you.
Hold the mic up, yeah.
Sandy Sanders.
Blogger. Ah, it's not alarm. They knew me better than they thought. I'm Sandy Sanders. I'm a blogger for Virginia Right. Here's my question. War on drugs sounds great. Let's legalize drugs. The problem is, in my view, and I want you all to try to answer this because I want to understand. They're never going to let kids have drugs. They're probably going to make the age 21. They're probably going to have schedules of drugs. They're still going to do the border. Now, I think you can take positions like the federal government should stay out, except under certain circumstances. But how do you convince someone that wants to be convinced but is something of a skeptic, that's me, that what you want to do, how you're going to fight the war on drugs, many, many valid criticisms of the criminal justice system, and I'm a lawyer, so I know. But how do you answer the question about the proliferation of drugs and how there's still going to be laws, there's still going to be police, and all of that? How do you answer those types of questions and come up with a policy that the majority of the people can at least understand and see as a visionary policy?
As someone who believes that every substance should be as legal as tomatoes, I do want to actually wind up doing something that I generally am opposed to and talk about a half measure. That half measure can be described in one word: Portugal. All that you have to do is look at Portugal, what they did, I believe, 14 years ago, when they decriminalized possession of every substance, and I think you can have up to like a week's worth of substance for personal use on your person at any given time. The rates of use have plummeted. The rates of abuse have plummeted because people are not being treated as criminals for having an addiction problem. People that are addicts are able to get the help that they need without stigma, without having to worry about, will I get arrested trying to go into the addiction center. The rates of teen use have plummeted. And also, you really need to look at Colorado and what happened after they legalized cannabis. The rates of teen use has plummeted in Colorado as well.
Good news, bad news. In 1999, I was the highest elected official in the United States to advocate for the legalization of marijuana, 1999. Bad news, 2016, I am still the highest ranking elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana. Now, what I've said is that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. What I have said from day one is let's legalize marijuana. We legalize marijuana. I think this country takes a quantum leap toward understanding substance abuse and the boogeyman that really doesn't exist. In Colorado, the Colorado campaign to legalize marijuana was a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. That is also something that I've always said. I've always said that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse because people are going to find it as such a safer alternative than all the other substances out there, starting with alcohol. So I have always also maintained I am not advocating legalizing all drugs, although I will follow that up with the following sentence. If we legalized all drugs tomorrow, the world would be a much better place. And that gets back to the point. 90% of the drug problem is prohibition, not use-related, and that should be the focus. We legalize marijuana, quantum leap with regard to understanding and substance abuse, and that is happening.
Thank you. I believe that I would try to sway Americans with facts, and here are the facts. From the Center of Disease Control, alcohol costs $59 billion per year. Marijuana, zero except self-imposed. Alcohol, 1 death per 51 minutes. Marijuana, 0. Alcohol, 30 people die per day vehicle-related. Marijuana, none. Alcohol, 10,000 deaths per year vehicle-related. 0 marijuana. Alcohol, 241 total deaths per day. Marijuana, 0. Alcohol, Center of Disease Control, 88,000 deaths per year. Marijuana, none. Center of Disease Control, 2.5 million years of potential life lost annually. 2.5 million years of potential life lost annually, alcohol. None, marijuana. I believe that Americans have a right to gravitate away from alcohol to safer methods of relaxation like marijuana. It's a states' rights issue too. But a few other things.
Time's up.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
It is a complex issue, but the President of the United States does not go at it with delegalization plans, prohibition, or statistics. The President commands the highest office in the position of the Republic. What you do is you translate the war on drug into the war on totalitarianism in D.C. Colorado votes to legalize marijuana. Federal government, in respect of the Republic, should honor that and federally delegalize it in the state of Colorado. You let the good people of the individual states decide for themselves the extent of legalization or plans to delegalize it, but yet accommodate the adverse effects that will occur. I'm running for the president. I'm not running for governor of a state, trying to dictate to the states how to conduct their internal affairs. We must wage war on DC totalitarianism. Thank you.
Do we have time for a follow-up? No, unfortunately, we do not have time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We do have to move it to their next question. So.
He didn't answer that.
Oh, you didn't answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. An important, certainly marijuana research is showing us that there's a lot more benefits to marijuana, and we need to do more research and decriminalize. I want to mention something very quickly that's an issue dear to what some work we're doing with in Texas, and that is psychotropic medications, where the government, your government, is using these medications on veterans, using the medications on children. I caution that this is extremely dangerous. We do not know the long-term effects from these, and often they are suicide-inducing, some of these psychodrug medications. And so the idea that government knows better than you about any kind of medication is probably fallacious and very, very dangerous for you.
Thank you. I know we're moving into the second question from the panel, and then we still have time for the audience to ask any questions. So.
I'm an unknown law professor at Harvard named Lawrence Lessig. Raised $1 million online with a one-issue campaign where he said, I want to make campaign contributions and better ballot access and things like that. I was amazed at that campaign, and I wrote about it. In fact, I would suggest that Professor Lessig, with all due respect, I think he chickened out. He should have gone the Ron Paul route when he didn't get into debates and continued his campaign. What I would like to ask you is sort of a combination of the ballot access and the fundraising questions. Third parties have difficulty getting ballot access and raising funds. Is this something that, how are you going to deal with the fundraising, and how are you going to try to help the Libertarian Party and other third parties get better ballot access in the various states?
I'll answer the second part of that question first. And I have actually, over the last couple of years since moving to New Hampshire, gone consistently to the New Hampshire legislature and lobbied the legislators to try to ease ballot access, to give the minor party and independent candidates the same path to the ballot that the Republicans and the Democrats have. I found a state rep to introduce a bill that would have done just that, and unfortunately the legislature voted to kill the bill. I believe there were 52 of the 400 legislators that voted for full ballot access. And that is what we're up against. We're up against Republicans and Democrats that make the rules, and they want to protect themselves from competition. If you were here this morning during the business session, you heard one of the gentlemen on the state committee mention that 62 members of the Virginia House of Delegates had absolutely no opposition in their most recent re-election campaigns. And that is a huge problem. So we need people to lobby like I've been doing, and hopefully we can wind up bringing about change.
Well, ballot access, from a libertarian standpoint, I think we have a big opportunity here to break through to a certain percentage where ballot access won't be an issue potentially in future elections. And again, this hinges on the Libertarian nominee and how well the Libertarian nominee does in the general election. From a dollar standpoint, third parties are at a big disadvantage. And again, I think this cycle, the Libertarian nominee for president has a chance to break through when it comes to those dollars. You may not be asking this question, and I hope I'm on track here with what you are asking, but I think that campaign contributions should be unlimited, but that there should be 100% transparency behind those contributions. Right now, with the Supreme Court decision making corporations, individuals, and super PACs, you have absolutely zero transparency, and you have unlimited amounts that can get contributed to campaigns, which I don't think is a plus. Our lawsuit, Gary Johnson suing the Presidential Debate Commission, we also included the Green Party in that lawsuit because of fairness, because they statistically could have also won the presidency in 2012 by garnering 270 electoral votes. I do think that more voices is better, and as governor, I thought I signed a bill making ballot access more equal in New Mexico. Richard Winger, want to get the name right, has informed me that that probably wasn't the case, but when I signed the legislation, the notion was to make it as easy as possible for any third party to get on the ballot, and as governor, that's a philosophy that I had and espoused as governor, and believe it. It should be easy, and any political party should be able to get on the ballot.
Well, first of all, you don't mind. I've had my whole life running small businesses against the big guys, and you have to have better ideas and better service and a better party in this case. I think that you have to be aggressive. You have to sue for the ballot access if it's being denied. A whole lot of also what is going on in politics is there's an awful lot of corruption in the campaign finance. When I hear Bernie Sanders talk about just anything he wants to talk about, knowing what I know about how they have to raise campaign funds and all, I think he owes the American people an explanation of just exactly where his money is coming from, and I want to call him out on it, and I want somebody to follow up on it. I think he's crooked as a snake. You also have to have a better message, and I believe I have a better message. Our party needs a better message. You're not going to be able to whine and cry and ask somebody to help you. They don't do that. That's not the world. You got to go take it. You got to be better. And finally, as far as building the Libertarian Party, there's things we can do to help every candidate. A candidate goes to 50 states and spends $1,000 per state, and we've spent $50,000. When I leave here, if I could possibly do it, I'll go to a state and find one donor who can buy a salon room in a hotel for $200, and we will have events per state for every candidate they can come to, not at their expense, but at the expense of donors and the Libertarian Party, and handle it in a small way. And all of a sudden, all of our candidates can get a great deal of exposure, and I think that's how I attack it.
Thank you.
The problem is actually easy to solve. If you're the Greens, you marginalize yourself, only pushing environmental issues, you remain marginalized. When you're the Libertarian Party and you're pushing legalized drugs, you remain marginalized. What you need to do to get proper ballot access is to have broad appeal so that you can get a large constituency signing petitions to get you on the ballot. You solve ballot access by appealing to the vast majority of Americans in the political complex as it exists. And that is my solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Very difficult and problem. We're probably not going to solve it, but we certainly need to address it. And the campaign funding, I did fight the Citizens United decision versus the Federal Election Commission. How in the world, think about this, the Supreme Court rules that this dark money, this secret money has First Amendment. Like, this is the money of the rich people is now protected as if they're a person. Do rich people not already have a First Amendment? So now their secret money has the First Amendment protection. But of course, the 50 states can conduct their own elections. So this is going to have to go state by state by state. So any ideas that you all have are appreciated. Thank you for the question. I want to leave you with one last thought. Somebody famous once said, let's not confuse the freedom train with the gravy train. And it's pretty obvious that the Republican and Democrats are on the gravy train, and so we really need to think about that when we're analyzing this problem.
The Affordable Care Act. Prior to 2012, there was about 45 million Americans without health care, roughly. 90% of those Americans now have health care under Obamacare. What is your plan? Because I'm sure it's going to be to repeal government health care, but what is the plan to replace that health care so we can have Americans covered with health care.
I think something that has been really misunderstood is that everyone in America received health care. I mean, no one went without health care. It's just who paid for it. I completely reject the insurance model. The fact that we have insurance to cover ourselves for everyday health care needs. Look, what we need when it comes to health care is a genuine free market approach to health care. Pay as you go in a system that's very competitive, and it will cost a fifth of what it currently costs. In a free market approach for health care, we will have health care in our own lives to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and we will pay as you go in a system that's genuinely free market. Stitches are us. Gallbladders are us. Doing surgeries at thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. X-rays are us. Radiologists on the corner that will read the X-rays from X-rays are us for $70. We're going to be talking about out-of-pocket expenses, very affordable, as opposed to a model currently that is dictated by Medicaid and Medicare and the government, and it's getting worse, not better. My own insurance policy has quadrupled, and I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years.
So I read a news story last night that said that yes, in fact, over 90% of Americans now have health insurance. It's amazing what happens when you force people to do something. When you tell them either pay for this health insurance that you probably don't want, or pay this $2,000 fine, well, there are actually some people that are realizing it's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to buy the health insurance that they're not going to use in the first place. So as the governor said, we need to repeal it. We need to have an actual free market, which has never actually existed in this country, sadly. But I look forward to the day that I can buy therapeutic cannabis from the corner store with Bitcoin.
I would replace, I would not repeal it. I would have it replaced before that thought could be finished. I would replace it with an ultra-capitalistic plan, birth loop plus health care. And it is the distinction, Bernie and I have one thing in common. We have some big goals that we would like to accomplish. End poverty, provide health care, college education, wealthy retirement, and restructure our international aid. The difference between Bernie and I is he is absolutely my arch enemy. He's a socialist. He's a socialist. He's a big government guy. I am a ultra-capitalist, and that's what this plan is. And I don't have much more time than that to talk to you about it, but I'd like to make that distinction. I'm absolutely not a big government guy.
Thank you.
All social programs at the federal level will be eliminated and transferred unto the states to manage as they deem fit. The model being a system of charter banks, shelters, kitchens, and clinics. The idea being is that I will not tolerate a society that allows an injured individual to die on the street. I am not that kind of a person. It's predominantly free market based, but there must be a minimum safety net at the state level, and when you have it across all 50 states, they compete with each other and provide a cost-effective minimum level of safety nets, and that is the Republic solution. It is a workable solution. Thank you.
I certainly agree that we need a 50-state solution. In Texas, we already had, you know, if you needed free health care, you could go to the county hospital. That was the law. And I think libertarians sell themselves short with the idea, so I'll address this to the panel because, you know, having been in the other political parties, I've only recently come to the Libertarian Party. I just didn't know that they were active. But, so I was in all those other parties, Republican, Democratic, Green Party. And we sell ourselves short because people think that we're going to just discontinue government, you know, there's going to be chaos, that, you know, nothing is going to get done. And I think really libertarians are the most caring, that we shouldn't say that we just don't throw people under the bus. And I think the other parties do, really, the Republican, Democratic parties, when you look at their policies. I think in a libertarian society, we would not be seeing the kind of turmoil when you see out on the streets, you know, the homeless people, the kind of turmoil we have in government programs. Libertarians would personalize that more and get, you know, private individuals and private organizations more involved, and I think it would be a more successful society than the one we're looking at today.
In Virginia, we have a problem where we can't get rid of incumbents. In 2 Novembers ago, with incumbents, and 2 Novembers ago, when our U.S. Senate race came within a percentage point of each other, every congressional race was also on the ballot. Not a single congressional race came within 15 percentage points of the next candidate. And just last November, we had a situation where every single incumbent to our General Assembly got reelected, despite $80 million plus being spent to try to oust some of these folks. Nothing really changed. I believe we need redistricting reform in Virginia and all across the country. We're starting to see it in other states. In fact, Ohio just recently passed it through their state legislature, and Nebraska is actually talking about it. Other states have done it in run around. If you believe we need redistricting reform, I'd be interested to know that. But also, is this a state-by-state solution, or is this one of those fundamental systematic flaws in our republic that should be addressed or could be addressed from the national level?
Well, I hear what you're saying, redistricting. Well, would that be the silver bullet? I think there's a silver bullet out there, and it's term limits. I think that if we enacted term limits for Congress and the Senate, that individuals that got elected would do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. And right now, I intend to be part of a movement to present to members of Congress a proposal for term limits that would grandfather you as the sitting office holder in that district, that would grandfather you in that, so you can sign off on supporting term limits in the future. I also think that if the 17th Amendment were never were to have been implemented, which is the direct election of U.S. senators, that if we would have never enacted the 17th Amendment, that the senators would have been appointed by state legislatures, that we would not be in the financial straits that we're in right now. And the financial straits we're in right now is really desperate.
Back in 2010, I saw a statistic that said that the re-election rate in the Soviet Union, which, as we all know, had one political party, was approximately 93%. And that the re-election rate to Congress in the United States was approximately 95%. So I began doing research. And I found out that in the United States, the re-election rate was actually about 93% for Congress, going all the way back to 1792, which was the first time they had anybody that could run for re-election to Congress. And I also find it interesting that Congress consistently has around 9% approval rating, but yet over 90% wound up getting re-elected. Is this because of gerrymandered districts, or is it something else? So I looked at Canada and I looked at the UK, which has a very similar system for electing members to Parliament. And I found that in those two countries that have fair ballot access, not only do they have more parties that are represented in their Parliament, but they also have a much lower re-election rate. Their re-election rate is in the high 70s, low 80s, not the high 90s. So it's something that is systematic, but it seems to be uniquely American in some respects. So I completely support proportional representation, to where if you poll 3%, you get 3% of the seats in the legislative body.
Thank you.
This isn't a subject I've thought about very much, and I don't know just how smart I am, but the way I would approach it is to listen and look at great ideas from smart people and evaluate which is the best. But it does seem to me, and what I do know about it, is that we redistrict now, we gerrymander now. It's just done by our elected representatives, and I don't know any other way it's going to be done in the future except with our future representatives, and those are the guys who draw the lines to benefit themselves, and so that seems to be kind of a circular problem. It does seem to me, under those circumstances, probably the best way to handle this problem is with term limits.
Thank you.
The corruption in the U.S. Congress is cemented and systemic. It has largely to do with the Federal Reserve System. To suggest a proposal to Congress, a hotbed of corruption on term limits would seem folly. As president, I would fund the Convention of States to limit the Senate to 4 terms, the House to 12 terms, and with the presidency of 2 terms, that offers any individual 56 years of federal service to the country, which I think is long enough. The solution is a Convention of States constitutional amendment, 4 terms for the Senate, 12 for the House. It works, it limits the corruption. But you also must come around and limit the money systems that feeds that corruption. And that has to do with going at the Federal Reserve System, which is not the subject of this question. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Very important question, and not easily answered. I think I agree. Term limits is one obvious way to deal with that. And what we're trying to do, of course, is dissipate the abuse of power that we see certainly at the federal executive level, but in other ways. And the 50 states is our alternative to federal power. So one other thing I could recommend is maybe limiting the amount of pay and salary that people get when they're holding these offices.
Now, unfortunately, for time reasons, we have to go to the candidates' closing statements.
So you all have 1 minute to do your closing statements in any particular order. You all want to start? Just 1 minute.
The party does not need a stagnator who has failed the party the last 4 years, doesn't need a profiteer, doesn't need an anarchist, doesn't need a panderer, but needs somebody with concrete solutions that will appeal to 90% of the population and win the White House. I'm the only candidate that can. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a libertarian, I'm a capitalist, free enterprise guy, and in my view, and I think every one of yours, our way is the best way. We have a responsibility to live up to the courage of our convictions. If we believe that, we should be able to show it. We should be able to have a program that demonstrates it. We should be able to do something that affects people's lives more than the people we say we can do better than. And that's what I did. I sat down one day to live with the courage of my convictions that free enterprise and capitalism is a far better way, and that is the proposal that I extend. And it is unique. It is easy to jump to conclusions right off the bat because of how our minds are conditioned. As soon as you hear that we are going to try to attempt some social maneuver, that's a big government thing, and it's not. This is a capitalistic, ultra-capitalistic approach. I am absolute the arch enemy of big government. That's it?
Yes, thank you.
So I've been called an anarchist a lot recently, twice today here in this room, probably numerous times online, but that's why you don't read the comments on the internet. But let me say that if supporting voluntary human interaction is wrong, then I don't want to be right. If opposing taxation is wrong, then I am proud to stand here firmly today and say that I am wrong on believing that it's okay to interfere in the life of another person and take their stuff without just cause. If it's wrong to think that you don't have the right to harm someone who has caused you no harm, then I don't want to be right. And I don't think that anybody else in this room would want to be right if those things are wrong. So again, join me in helping bring the Libertarian Party back to that party of principle, the party that believes that human interaction should be 100% voluntary and that you will not initiate the use of force for any reason to bring about political or social change.
Current state of politics in America. You've got Hillary that has to attract 30% of the far left to get the nomination. I think she's going to get the nomination. Trump is appealing to 30% of the far right who believe that the scourge of the earth is Mexican immigration to get the nomination. And when 50% of Americans now declare themselves as independent, what you end up with the two major parties is you end up with a solid 30% representation of the electorate. There is going to be a collective head jerk in this country regarding everybody else in the country, and everybody else in the country is libertarian. Although they may not know it, they are, and this is the opportunity that we have right now, and this can possibly go viral very quickly on the fact that the Libertarian Party is going to be the only party on the ballot in all 50 states. And when anybody is talking about third party, they know in the back of their mind it's libertarian, but we're on the cusp of having them identify that. And when they identify it, there becomes an awareness, and it could become a really viral national awareness, and we will shine under that spotlight.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for your Libertarian Convention, and thank each and every one of you. Having newly arrived at the Libertarian Party, I'm always trying to put this in context. So let me explain it this way. Libertarians are not subordinate to the party of the church. Now, I'm not denigrating the party of the church. That's the Republican Party. And in Texas, they actually say in their platform that it's Christian values is their platform. The other party, the Socialist Party, I'm not trying to denigrate the other party, but Libertarians are not subordinate to either party. Matter of fact, Libertarians are not subordinate to the government. And why is that? Because I don't have a copy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's why. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If there is no framework, if there is nothing in our past, in our history, what do we frame our future in? How do we, improve the future? How do we go about addressing that? So, once again, I want to come back to the idea of colonialism. This is about education. Crusades, the wars between the Christians and the Muslims in the Middle East about 1,000 years ago. So we're still in, I would contend that we're still in a crusading colonial period. So, we get 2 minutes on this? Oh, sorry. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you, guys.
Another round of applause for the candidates. Let's also extend our round of applause for the candidates.
You know what? There's a pin right up here. There's a Tonight I'm on I have a show called Weekend with Lonnie B on Kids on Friday night, 7 to 10. I'm on Wednesday Drink tonight, 7 to 10. And then tomorrow back on with Lonnie B on Sundays. Yeah. But I have a podcast on Talk Music, and that's how I kind of got to this, because I go around talk with streams. Podcast. Oh, yeah, that's let me give I have to just give it, I'm attached. I rarely answer the phone, and that's so personal, but that's just so big. So, check that. Well, I'll give you one. Good luck today. Yeah.
We'll be starting our panel discussion in 5 minutes. So please, if you have conversations, please finish your conversations or go out into the hall. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'd like to make a quick announcement just as a reminder. It just dawned on me a few minutes ago that I had not yet signed a presidential petition, and so if you have not signed a presidential petition yet this year in Virginia, who has Mark Montoni back there? I think that's Mark, waving a, yeah, please sign a petition for the love of Pete before you leave today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
May we please have our candidates who are serving on the panel come forward. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our next event, which will get Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The next event on the program is a forum among some of our candidates from 2015 and in one case 2014. The forum is entitled Lessons Learned, and I think it's important for us to have events of this sort. First of all, if nothing else, to pay tribute to the people who stepped up to the plate to represent the Libertarian Party. I think at the beginning of this event, I think these gentlemen deserve tremendous applause. And also, I think that they will serve to inspire the rest of us, perhaps to take that step forward to represent the Libertarian Party in elections. To serve as the moderator for this event, I can't think of a better person in the Libertarian Party of Virginia than our outgoing chairman, Bill Redpath. So please welcome Mr. Redpath.
All right, and to quote Jackie Gleason, away we go. I'd like to know first, what is it that at the beginning motivated you to run for public office? Why don't we just go down the row here, start with, oh, you need a mic, damn. All right, hold on. This will work.
All right, we're here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Andy Bacher. I ran last year for the House of Delegates in the 46th district, which is about the western half of Alexandria City, right outside of DC. What motivated me to run? Partially, people asked. That's a big thing. If you're a local chairman, if you're on the state committee, just ask. People out there are interested in running, and that goes a long way. I've always been very interested in politics and in social change, and when I got that ask, I was ready to go. So that would be my message.
Hello, I'm Joshua Huffman. I'm the lone candidate from 2014 up here. Ran for Harrisonburg City Council. And what motivated me was, just a love of principles, wanting to spread a message of liberty. And then so when my city party chairman asked me to run for city council, I said, okay, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
I'm Brian Sujanan. I ran for Virginia House of Delegates last year, representing the 87th district. And what motivated me, I actually got involved with the Rob Sarvis campaign at the end of 14, became an active volunteer and hooked up with some libertarians in Loudoun County, where I live. Around that time, we started thinking about starting a county affiliate in Loudoun County, which happens to be the fastest growing county in Virginia. What a great opportunity to start a political party there. And so a little bit of that and some peer pressure from the folks that I was starting this affiliate with. So a little peer pressure, a little bit of the timing was right.
Hi, I'm Mark Anderson. I ran in the 33rd district in the House of Delegates in Frederick County, Clark County, and Loudoun County. And I guess what really motivated me to run were two of the men in this room, Bill Redpath and Rob Sarvis, their campaigns, and volunteering for their campaigns in 2014 exposed me to a lot of things, and hearing their knowledge on a often nightly basis at county fairs and different things, and was really the motivation behind me deciding to put my hat in the ring.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I guess my next question is, okay, so now you've decided to run. Let people know, what was the process like? What was it like petitioning? And also you had to get the nomination from the Libertarian Party. Tell us about that. What was it like getting on the ballot?
Well, it's not easy. State delegate, the requirements are not so bad. It's about 125 signatures. It's a lot of mornings standing out at the farmers market. We did some door to door with mixed success. I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to petition when you're the one running than it is to say, I want this other person on the ballot who you've never met or never seen. So that takes away some of the difficulty. People are excited to meet a candidate. It doesn't matter who it is. As far as the nomination process, you reach out to the state chair or the congressional district chair. We're lucky enough that Dave Valente in my congressional district is also very involved. He's looking around. very involved on the Lpofva board, so I gotten to know him. Nomination process is very easy. Petition is very doable.
All right. Well, I suppose we all needed 125 signatures to make the ballot. And for me, I just figured I'd go do it myself, and that's what I did. I mean, it's actually that is doable for one person to do. Now, it's great to have a group of folks doing it. Actually, I brought something with me here today. This is a newspaper, my local newspaper, and so when I actually did out ballot petitions, I thought, well, what would be great to have Robert Sarvis come and do this with me, because of course he was also running. And it's fantastic. We actually made the front page of our local newspaper. Now, the second part of the question, of course, was a little trickier. Unfortunately, the day that this came out, I got a call from my city party chairman who pretty much told me if I was going to run, I would be running without the Libertarian support of the city. And that made things very hard. I mean, the idea is you want to work together, you want to advance common principles. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge I wasn't expecting.
Same as Andy, we had a nominating convention in the 10th congressional district for myself. I had to organize that, put that event together, and from there it was getting on the ballot. Unfortunately, I kind of decided late in the game, so I was under a time crunch. I did make it. I thought it would be easier than it would. It turned out to be. Maybe in contrast to Andy, I actually had less success at farmers markets because of the way the district lines were drawn. Even in my own community, we had a farmers market, but the majority of the folks that were there were actually out of district for me. So I ended up having to go door to door, Saturday and Sunday for a couple of consecutive weekends, and I would start early and go all day. But it is doable with one person. I actually had some volunteers helping me for a few hours here and there as well.
Yeah, nominating is in the 10th district as well. A few of us met one dark night to make sure nobody more qualified wanted to run. The petitions was, I wasn't smart enough to go to a farmer's market, so I went door to door with Bill Redpath and knocked him out in about 2 weeks, I think, roughly 3 weeks. And yeah, it isn't pleasant, but it's something that has to be done right now.
I would add, one of my biggest supporters I met on the very first day I was out ballot petitioning at a farmer's market. I met a gentleman who lived, just a couple miles from me, and was surprised to see a Libertarian out there trying to run for House of Delegates. And he supported me throughout the campaign and was there on election night having a beer with me. So that's one of my most fondest memories of the campaign.
Looking back, what things are you glad you did? What went right? What went wrong? Or what would you, let me put it this way, what do you think went most right about your campaign? And if there was one thing, what are the things that you would change if you had to do it all over?
Sure, so one of the buttons I have today is my Certified Driver for Liberty button. Everybody should go to Carla Howell's. Everyone should go to Carla Howell's session. You don't want to go to the SEC meeting. Go to Who's Driving. It's a great way to learn candidate skills, and that's what I took into my campaign. We drove. My campaign was very much focused on cannabis legalization, and we forced the other candidates to talk about our issue. And at every event, we hammered them. And what would happen is, I met a Democratic volunteer in Alexandria City whose sister owned a dispensary in Colorado. And I would say something at one of these events, and he would go to the sitting delegate and say, "What do you think about this?" "Well, isn't it a little bit crazy that you're still, backing prohibition? This doesn't make any sense." And, lo and behold, this session, she was one of the biggest supporters of the medical marijuana bill that just went through the House. The committee that she was supporting. And as far as things that went wrong, I don't think anything went wrong. We're over here volunteers. I was in school, these guys are working, so you just can't do everything that you want to do, and you got to decide kind of where to put your priorities. If there was one thing that I could have spent more time doing, I wish I could have gotten a little bit more FaceTime, done a little bit more canvassing, a little bit more phone banking. Unfortunately, there wasn't really the opportunity to do that, but that's something I would keep in mind in the future.
Let's see, things went right, things went wrong, I suppose. One of the best moments for me is, of course, I tried to reach out to anybody I could, regardless of if they were supporting one of my opponents or not. And so I attended a Republican function in the city of Harrisonburg, and got to hear my Republican opponents talking, and it was rather funny. The guy I was sitting next to, after he heard them speak, he turned to me and he said, "You know what, these guys are socialists." Then he donated to my campaign, and I didn't have to say a word. It was fantastic. But another thing, with the people that I got to meet along the journey, and also the people that were willing to help out, that really means a lot to you when you've got someone willing to donate to your campaign, willing to donate time or money. Some of us have more than one or the other. Now, in terms of what didn't go so well, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but unfortunately didn't win. It would have been nice to increase the vote total beyond what we did. And also, I suppose you could look back and say every campaign, it would have been great to advance liberty even more than what we did. Obviously, again, there was just a city race. It wasn't as large of a House of Delegates. But, to look back even more and say, these are some great things we accomplished, and I wish we could have done better at that.
In terms of accomplishments, I can't be thankful enough for the volunteers that helped me out along the way. For a while there, I was trying to learn how to be good at social media, and I think I'll forever be bad at it. So, fortunately, I had a young gentleman join the team who sort of spearheaded that and became my social media guy and took care of me that way. And then there's not enough time to tackle all of the various issues that come up when you're out talking to constituents. And this is one of the good things about ballot petitioning is you get out and you're actually talking to constituents before Republicans and Democrats are. So I was using that opportunity to also ask them, hey, what are some issues that you'd like to see me address throughout my campaign? So that a lot of things come up, and off the cuff, you don't always have libertarian solutions for every single issue that somebody could possibly bring up. So I had another gentleman join my campaign to help me out with that, to do research and to come up with good, solid libertarian solutions for all of the issues that came along. And then, of course, my campaign manager, who nagged me relentlessly to fill out those political action questionnaires. That was very helpful because it allowed me to participate in a lot of FaceTime with these committees. And one of the most successful things about my campaign, I think, is I'm very serious. Like Loudoun County, there's a lot of agriculture, particularly in the western Loudoun County. It's very important that it's wine country. So I had an opportunity to go talk to the Virginia Farm Bureau one Thursday evening, and I prepared really well for that. Both the Republican and Democratic opponents were there. They had gone before me. I was the last one to go. It was late evening. I got to spend some time with them. And then when they decided, they said, we're going to make our decision about our endorsement in the next couple of days, and we'll send out letters. And so the result of that was that they remained neutral in the race because they didn't have to choose between Republican and Democrat. I had gone there. They were impressed with the libertarian solutions that I had proposed to a lot of the issues that farmers are facing in Loudoun County. And that's also one of my fondest memories from the campaign was forcing the political action committee to remain neutral. And in terms of challenge, thank you. In terms of challenge, fundraising, I'm terrible at it. I'm awful at asking people for money. Fortunately, I have some friends who are very generous and helped me out along the way. And I did self-fund a little bit as well.
I guess what went well was entering speaking engagements with the idea that I was going to talk about libertarianism and talk about the issues and You know, one event sticks out in particular was we call it's the Hobnob in the Valley. It's held at the community college in Frederick County, and one of my opponents was there and spent the entire time, you know, basically giving an Oscar acceptance speech, thanking God and his family and everybody. And, you know, then I followed up one of the last candidates, I believe, and I spoke about education and drug reform and the issues, the big ones to me at the time. And prior to that event, my little table that I had in the corner, nobody showed up to. After that, there were people all around my table saying that I was the only one speaking of issues and the only one, you know, talking about how we're going to solve problems and do the things that need to be done. So that, you know, that worked really well. What didn't work was transferring it into volunteers. Part of that is maybe just not wanting to relinquish control of any part of the campaign, but really just I didn't do a very good job of getting the people that were interested and wanted to vote for me and said they pledged their support, and getting them out to go door to door or the other things that volunteers can do.
By the way, I want to welcome the audience to ask questions. If you get up, I'd like you to be recognized by me, number one, and then bellow your question, number two, because I'm not bringing the mic out there. But one thing about running for federal office that I've always enjoyed, which I guess I've done it the last I've been a candidate 6 times. The first 3 times were for state office, the last 3 times were for federal office. One of the good things about federal, there are a couple of good things. One is that federal issues are discussed in the news all the time, number one. Number two, there are lots of issues where you run as a federal candidate and you say, well, that's a state issue. Leave it to the states. And it's the easy answer, it's the right answer, what's not to like? But I think the farther you go down in government, the more, I'm going to say, managerial government questions become. And state issues are not as publicized in the popular press as federal issues. So my question is, with that preface, my question is, what did you do, and Joshua, you can comment perhaps on local issues, what did you do to become familiar and knowledgeable about the issues you had to address as a candidate for state office or local office?
Well, again, for me, I had my issues going out of the gate, and I tried to stay very, very focused on my 3 issues. And the ones that I worked with was legalizing cannabis, ending the state income tax, and abolishing the Alcoholic Beverage Control Agency. You know, the great thing about these issues is that they're not new. Most people out there have heard a candidate say one of them. You know, maybe they just haven't heard somebody say all 3 at the same time. So they were, you know, libertarian to the core, but also there and doable and familiar and workable in that way.
Well, sure. Of course, we go down to the local level, and people ask me what my opinion is on foreign policy. I was like, well, pretty sure city council doesn't have much of a role in that. And the same with marijuana legalization. I mean, whether your city wants it or doesn't, I mean, the city council can't really do anything about it. We are a Dillon rule state. But for me, the way I learned about it, when I was younger, I actually went to city council meetings. I got up and spoke several times. They never listened to a word I said, stopped going. But over a year before I actually ran for office, started regularly attending city council meetings again, getting myself familiarized, seeing who I thought in the council would be receptive to the ideas of liberty, who didn't. Actually made some poor decisions on that one, but because apparently none of them actually stand for liberty, but that's another issue entirely. But in focusing on issues that ask people, why is the government involved in this area? For example, many years ago, Harrisonburg got involved in a boondoggle where they actually have a city-run golf course. And of course, we have private-run golf courses in the area. And I said, we're losing $500,000 on this thing every year. Why in the world is the city doing this? Also during the campaign, an issue that came up was a hotel and conference center that James Madison University was building, JMU's, in the city limits. And they wanted to get, not to pay taxes on it for $10 million worth of taxes for free. And of course, all the hotel managers in the area came there and said, this is not fair. We're not getting $10 million in taxes for free. But of course, at the end of the day, the city council didn't care. So trying to highlight the issues, saying, again, is this an area where the government should be involved? Is crony capitalism a good thing? I thought it wasn't.
So I had been paying attention to what other libertarian candidates have been talking about for a few years. Because in the back of my mind I was playing, I'm going to run for public office. I wasn't sure it would be local, state, certainly not federal level, but local or state is where my head was. So I started paying attention a lot more to what was being said in the media, and then I really sought out other libertarian candidates, not just in Virginia but around the country. Started following them on social media and learning about their campaigns and looking at the issues. But when it came down to running for House of Delegates in Virginia, as I said earlier, I was out there collecting ballot signatures. I didn't waste that opportunity. I used that to actually talk to people to find out what was important to them. Loudoun County is kind of unique right now because it has a lot of growing pains. There's 100 new homes being moved into every month. We have terrible traffic congestion there. We've outgrown all of our schools, so a lot of these issues, and we have energy problems already. And so there are issues around eminent domain abuse, trying to build new power lines, taking people's private property. So a lot of these things are more nuanced to the average citizen. Became very enunciated for me, and I was talking to folks who were feeling this pain. So that's really how I started to learn about the really important issues. Schools and roads are things that libertarians would rather not have to address, but I had no choice in Loudoun County. Our infrastructure is terrible, and our schools are burgeoning with students, and so it really became an issue. Richmond generates a lot of revenue from Northern Virginia, and we just weren't getting a return on that investment. And so that was my message. We needed some of that money to come back to Northern Virginia to help us out. Ideally, it would be left in our pockets. That message is a hard sell because another challenge I have in Loudoun County is that most of the people I talk to work for the federal government, either directly or indirectly as a contractor. So selling the message of reducing the footprint of government or reducing government does not resonate with them at all. So I had these challenges, and so I had to present libertarian solutions in a way that would be appealing to them. And so again, just talking to people, going out, walking the walk, knocking on doors, standing out at the farmers market, and being compassionate and sympathetic to the lives of your neighbors is the best way to really understand what the issues are that's going on in your community. And then the next step is to develop solutions that are common sense and are liberty-minded.
I had for a long time been involved in politics from writing letters to the editor and things of that nature. I've been aware of issues and had strong opinions. But in preparing for the House of Delegates run, it really, once somebody self-identifies as a libertarian and they start hanging out with other libertarians, they become more libertarian. And that's one of the reasons I believe in this concept of big tent libertarianism. Accept people, let them hang out with us, and they will start to see that we're right. But really, so just hanging out with the candidates from 2014 and people like Jim Lark and my fellow candidates, learned things and just how to apply them, how to apply the libertarian idea to it, was really all that I had.
I see hands. I see 3 hands, and we'll get to all of you. The first hand was actually Mr. Carr, then we'll go to Carla Howell, then we'll go to Matt Chalko. Bellow your question, please, Mr. Carr.
So it doesn't matter if you're running for local, state, federal government, or if you're having a drink with a friend in a bar, there's one question you're always going to get, and I want to hear how everybody has addressed this, because I think the crowd, as we're talking with friends, is probably going to benefit from it. But I'm just wasting my vote if I vote for you. You can't win. How do you address that? How do you overcome that thought, not just when you're out going door to door, but also with friends?
So that's a great question, and I think the short answer is the one that Gary Johnson gave at CPAC, where the wasted vote is a vote for someone you don't believe in, and that resonates with people very well. Sometimes that question is a little bit deeper, and what people are looking for, first of all, is just progress. We're getting there, we're building. Here are the things that the Libertarian Party is doing. Look at them; they're listening to our issues. We're getting local candidates elected all over the country, and we're growing and we're growing and we're growing. So that goes a long way. People are going to ask that question. The best thing to do is turn it to the issues and to build relationships, I think.
To me, the definition of a wasted vote is a vote that you regret. And I find that happens a lot. I mean, when I first started voting, I ended up regretting quite a few of my votes. I cast my first presidential ballot for George W. Bush.
Get out of here.
I learned something about 2004, though. But I mean, and of course, that's the real trick. I mean, like for example, we just had the Republican and Democratic primaries here in Virginia, and people talking about, we got to vote for the lesser of two evils, the lesser of two evils. I'm like, good gravy. I mean, why do you expect things are getting worse? You're voting for the lesser of two evils. Vote for somebody you believe in. And yes, they may win, they may not win. But at least you could say, I did my part. In our case, I supported liberty. Liberty may win today, liberty may not win today. But at least I didn't create this system where I voted for this complete scumbag that's slightly less scummy than the other guy. I mean, that's just lunacy.
Yeah, I'll just echo what's already been said. You have to vote for somebody that you believe in. There's another common quote, which is, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you still end up with evil. So I've always been a strong believer in that. That motivated me to start talking to my friends a little bit more about campaigns, because I was hearing them complain about the candidates, and particularly this year, it's really bad. I'm sure it's, everybody has the same story. We can't believe we're in this situation, right? So what are we going to do about it? I think it's a long journey. One of my very best friends was a longtime Republican, and one day, and we happened to work together for a while, and we were coming back from lunch, and he was talking about how he had to go to the post office to mail a package, and I said, well, why don't you just use UPS or FedEx or something? And he said, they're too expensive, and was complaining about the cost of FedEx and UPS, and I said, well, you realize that you're also that they're charging you the actual cost of shipping this thing. The post office is subsidized, right? So you're paying for it anyways. And he just kind of stopped and looked at me, and he was like, "Oh, you're right." And so that began a long discussion that's still happening today over beer about various services that are subsidized by the federal government. And I'm proud to say now he's on Facebook sharing Lpofva memes. So he's come a long way, and he was also my biggest campaign donator last year in 2015.
On primary day, getting petition signatures, a very staunch conservative woman approached me and spoke with me going in. I asked her to sign the petition, and she was going in to vote for Ted Cruz, and she came back out and she stopped again and she talked, and she posed that question. She said, would me signing this somehow potentially steal votes from the Republican, from the nominee? And I said, well, I don't think it would be a stolen vote. I think it would be, an earned vote for one thing. But however, I said, chances are it could be one way or the other. But why it worked is we spoke a long time about libertarianism, about the Constitution. She brought up the Constitution. She said nobody will defend the Constitution like Ted Cruz will. And I was like, well, Ted Cruz will only defend the amendments to the Constitution that he wants to defend. like the rest of them, the ones that he doesn't agree with, the 14th Amendment and those like that, he will not defend. So we transferred from that, and I was like, we've gone back from Republican to Democrat, and I was like, when has government gotten smaller? When are the taxes going down? When is spending going down? When has the deficit gone down? At what point under either party has anything gotten better from a smaller government standpoint as a Ted Cruz voter? I don't know if I converted her on the spot, but she definitely left with different feelings towards the Libertarian Party after that discussion.
I'd like to respond to that, and then I'll recognize Carla Howell for a question. I say several things. First of all, that people own their votes. Politicians don't own their votes, number one. Number two, I have thrown my vote away for decades and have not regretted it. But it's also, my issue is electoral reform, changing the election system. And I say to people, it doesn't have to be that way. The system can change. It doesn't have to be that way. And I'll talk about instant runoff voting. I'll talk about proportional representation, how most established democracies in the world use voting systems different than ours that allow more than a number of major parties. And a lot of people don't know that. So I use that as an opening to talk about my issue being electoral reform. And so, Carla Howell, I'll recognize you.
Thank you. I've heard from candidates and petitioners for the last 5 years or so around the country that voters are noticeably moving more in a libertarian direction. And I want to know how much you saw that. I know you're relatively young, so you don't have quite the same vantage point some of us have, but and what issues did you find where the Democrats and Republicans would not go? What issues did you propose that your opponents would not sign off on, like legalizing marijuana, ending the income tax, but that you sensed the voters were really very open to? Which issues would sort of hit the top of that list in your observations?
Definitely the war on drugs. In Winchester, we had the Republican committee chairman was running for Commonwealth's attorney to Winchester, Virginia. His platform was solely fully prosecuting everybody that came in with a drug offense. And he lost that election to an independent, 80% to 20%. And that has been probably, there are still people that are against drug legalization in any way, or drug reform in any way, criminal justice reform, but the majority of people are seeing the damage that the war on drugs does. It's seeing the militarization of the police force, and it's seeing the communities being decimated by this war on drugs. And I would say that is one of the big issues that people on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are coming around to our viewpoint on it.
What's big in Loudoun County right now is eminent domain. Virginia Dominion is under pressure right now to increase capacity, which requires them to have bigger energy towers, to hold bigger transmission cables. Because of a couple of data centers, I believe it's Amazon, very contentious. Up in Prince William County and in Loudoun County right now. And what's happening, the proposals are, running these towers down, through communities that have been in the works for a while, planned communities. They're very beautiful. We have lots of small businesses that have committed to having their business in these communities, and a lot of residents are upset. I even spoke to a couple of voters who. One is there's a couple of cases like this. Coming home from work, so you can imagine coming home from work and there are surveyors in your backyard. No notice, no nothing. You come home and they're out there just in your backyard, and they're Virginia Dominion employees trying to figure out where these lines are going to come through and
Did the Democrat Republican take the opposite position from you on that?
Did they take the opposite position? No, they didn't talk about it in terms of eminent domain. They both claim to be against these high power transmission lines, but nobody was talking about it in the context of eminent domain and really talking about property rights like I was. And this is where I started talking to folks. I said, there's an exception clause in the Virginia Constitution about eminent domain that is an exception clause for utility companies, and so there's room to abuse that, and that's what's happening. And so, talking to people about laws and regulations that have been put in place actually protect these companies and not the individual. So that was one issue. Civil asset forfeiture is another issue. We know that those bills had died just recently in subcommittee. And then, of course, the war on drugs. I'll never forget walking down the street with my campaign manager, bumping into an older couple, introduced myself, and the first question they asked me is, what's your position on marijuana? And we proceeded to talk about that position. And they were very, very happy to hear that because their daughters was just about to graduate from college. If I recall correctly, it was Virginia Tech or maybe UVA, but she was off campus with some friends. One of the friends had some marijuana. They headed back to campus in a car. They got pulled over. The officer ended up searching the vehicle, and found the marijuana. So now, the parents are using, spent a lot of money on lawyers, and this poor woman has this record now, which is going to follow her. And she's really devastated because, apparently she's probably a bright woman, and it's going to be very hard for her to start her career with this record. And so that's another issue that my opponents wouldn't touch, and I was the only candidate actually talking about it.
Well, I would say we're in a rather exciting time right now. I mean, you look at the presidential race, and of course we've got a criminal running on one side, and could be a fascist on the other. And there are a lot of people who are saying, sort of opening their eyes and saying, well, what do we do? We can't just keep going where we're going. And I was very encouraged today. Here in our audience, we actually had I think one of the former leaders of the Republican Party of Virginia, which I think was fantastic. So people are sort of waking up and saying, hey, we need principle. And along those same lines, it was interesting. I got to know my opponents quite well. Now, of course, I should mention there were 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans in my election. But the odd thing was, in some issues, one Democrat would take one stance and one would take another, and same with the Republicans. It was all over the place. They didn't have any principles, any unifying principles whatsoever. And you've seen that play out, I'm sure, as well. So, there wasn't any one specific issue besides the ones I mentioned already. But there was a moment after the campaign, or right toward the tail end, which I thought was fantastic. That was something that Mark Montoni told me. And then, of course, he came to our debates, which I think was great that he did. And he said, afterwards that his wife was there listening in the audience and said that I was the most libertarian candidate running. And, well, which is good, but I thought it was a great compliment because it meant that I was working toward principle. I mean, and that's something that you always have to keep in mind. Now, of course, we do have, there are some anarchists in this room. Don't happen to be one of them, but every day that I see the government, I wish there was less and less of it, of course. So perhaps I'm moving in that direction, I don't know. But the important thing is, yes, stick to the message. Don't waver in your support of liberty.
That's a great point. Don't ever waver. As far as issues where the old parties are wrong and the people are with us, the war on drugs is a great example, and specifically cannabis too, although the old parties are starting to join us on that one. Democrats, they love their income tax. Republicans wish they had a candidate who would say end the income tax, but the Democrats don't. But everyone can see what a humongous abuse the ABC is. It's ridiculous. This is a prohibition-era agency that, the socialized liquor and the prices that we have to pay are absurd. We're lucky enough in Alexandria that we can drive across the river and go buy our liquor in D.C. Folks in Richmond can't do that.
Except the state police follow you over there.
You might be right about that. But, the ABC, come on. We got to get rid of it.
Mr. Cholko, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so
resources well spent running for office? And if so, why are none of you running for Congress right now? No, seriously,
Turn it around and ask why Matt's not running for
Matt's running for Congress! It's not too late to run this year.
If so, are you likely to run for office again? And if not, why not? The first part of the question, I absolutely believe it was a worthwhile use of my time. We reached so many people. We brought in volunteers. We spread the message. We were able to provide something like a miniature referendum on cannabis legalization, at least in that small district. And we got a lot of yard signs out on the street, and that was a big deal. I absolutely intend to run again. I need a break. I'm doing committee work this year and next year. I will run again, but it's tiring. So plan it out accordingly.
Certainly, I mean, running for office, if you haven't done it, of course, I've been involved in campaigns since I was 15 years old. Being the candidate yourself is a totally different experience, I've got to tell you. I actually prefer helping other people than doing it myself. At least, being the front man for it. But, exactly what's the question again? I'm sorry.
Was it a worthwhile use of your time? Will you do it again?
Well, I don't think I'm going to run for local office again because I've seen the inner workings of the Harrisonburg City Council. That thing is so darn corrupt. Now, you probably could say that with the state government and the federal government. Well, I know the federal government. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think I would like to run for the General Assembly one day, hopefully with the support of many people in this room. But, I think it was worthwhile. It was a tremendous learning experience for me. I would like to think that my campaign... I met people on the campaign that haven't been active before, that came out just because I asked them to. I'm hoping that they continue to stay involved. That's the thing. You don't ever know when you run for office who you're going to reach. Like, I remember the first Libertarian candidate I met in 2010. I had a very negative opinion of the Libertarian candidates before that time until I actually met one. And, so the fact that we actually, you can meet real live people, they're not just these characters you hear about. So, absolutely.
Absolutely worth the time. I had the time of my life. In fact, the day after Election Day, when I realized it was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was ready to keep going, but I think it was more instinctual than it was. My head and my heart was in it. It was just at that point, I was so used to going out and knocking on doors and talking to as many people as I could, evangelizing the party, evangelizing liberty and freedom and equality. I felt like I had to keep going. Time passed. I forced myself to take a little rest, and then decided to focus on fostering the Libertarian Party of Loudoun County with the folks up there. So that's what I'm concentrating on in 2016. But I absolutely intend to run again for House of Delegates in 2017.
When I entered the race, my big goal was to obviously have a Libertarian candidate in this race against a particular sitting delegate, and my big goal was to do better percentage-wise than the previous Libertarian candidate in my district, just to see the progression of the party, and I accomplished that. So in that way alone, it was worth it. But the lessons I learned in the campaign, I'm not running this year because personally I feel I can do better being it's 2016, it's a presidential year, volunteering for the presidential nominee than running for the Board of Supervisors right now. But one of the lessons I've learned, I looked at the candidates in 2014, and as far as Frederick County, where I'm from, where the problems were with, were exposure and signage and things like that. So I thought of ways to do that. So my solution was to put a big ass sign on my truck, framed with 2x4s, and it was 6 feet long by I think 3 feet tall, and it drove around my area every day. And so that's something I plan to do this year for president. So the lessons I learned last year are something I'm carrying over this year and as a volunteer. Will I run again? I have coincidentally been asked twice by the local Tea Party to run for Board of Supervisors this year, but I declined. But yeah, probably next year there's my county supervisor seat is up, and my House of Delegates district is up again. So I would assume that I would run next year.
I'll recognize this gentleman. I'm sorry, I don't know your name offhand.
Oh, thank you. My name is Seth Oxenden. To tie some of these together with the issues, and especially on cannabis reform, and then going with what can be done at the local level that is also a federal issue. And if we turn to Columbia, Missouri in 2004, there was a referendum to decriminalize cannabis, and we voted for that, and we passed it. So we took a local stand there. And if you look at D.C., it's sort of in between. And you had a social justice issue that you were able to pass. That what way, and in between going from a candidate and then moving these issues forward, are there sort of like you said, you got a referendum sort of going. Are there issues that you think people could coalesce around in the interim, bringing your name as leaders, not so much officially politicians, but a real leader in the community that you could take and use that for your benefit and all of ours? Thank you.
Sure, if I'm understanding right, the issues that we could take up as community leaders and not necessarily candidates is, again, the war on drugs and property rights and the things that have been mentioned up here. I think, I write my local newspaper, I think once a month, about an issue and apply the libertarian perspective just to keep for future candidates, future campaigns, to keep our local committee in the news or whatever, in the public's eye. I write them to apply the libertarian perspective to different things, many different issues, but a lot of it's centering around criminal justice, the courts and war on drugs and those sorts of things. I think that's where somebody said, I saw a quote online that said if marijuana was legalized, the Libertarian Party would become irrelevant. I think the opposite has shown to be true in Colorado and Washington. So I think that's really one of the biggest issues. The money wasted on the war on drugs and the criminal justice system in general is just enormous. That's the big issue for me going forward.
I guess I would agree. It's definitely the war on drugs. We are the only candidates really bringing it to the forefront. And it leads to a couple of other issues that I also tried to highlight during my campaign. Civil asset forfeiture abuse is one of them. Basically policing for profit, right? But it all comes back to the war on drugs. It targets young adults. It targets minority communities unfairly. And so that's where you get into civil liberties and into justice. So I think marijuana becoming legal. It's an interesting comment. We don't become irrelevant because we have to keep going. There are repercussions because of the war on drugs. Just because prohibition ended didn't mean that the policies all went away. Because if you look at alcohol prohibition, we were dealing with organized crime for a very long time because of it, and that was just a short little while, and the crime lasted for almost a century after prohibition ended, or the organized crime, the underground crime. So I think there's always going to be opportunity to address, issues around reform of the criminal justice system beyond legalization, and I think the Libertarian Party will certainly lead the way there, as it has been.
Well, I'm going to say something a little different. One thing I noticed when I was running for office, of course, is, as we all mentioned, we had to collect signatures in order to get on the ballot. In our case, 125. However, our Republican and Democratic opponents didn't have to do that. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem right. How's that fair? So after the election, I went to my state senator and I said, well, we've got to do something about this. My state senator happens, if he got a couple hundred more votes, he'd be our attorney general, if you wonder who that is. And he turned to me and he said, I don't want to see anyone other than Republicans and Democrats on the ballot. But I'm hung open for a few seconds, not knowing what to say. But, so at that point, I actually started writing pieces of legislation to find members of the General Assembly that actually would make this fair. I mean, everybody should go through the same hurdles. We've got this, there was a great bill by Sam Rasool down in Roanoke to make it so we have an easier time to have another parties on the ballots behind the Republicans and the Democrats. Of course, they went down in defeat. So I think a big issue is ballot access here. I mean, it's hard when we have to jump through these hurdles to get people on the ballot and other people don't. I mean, where's the fairness in that? It's just ludicrous. So I urge you, and of course, anyone who's a candidate knows this. I mean, I urge you to contact your delegate, to contact your senator, and say, hey, we've got to do something about this. Now, there are some good people out there. There are some good Republicans, there are some good Democrats, but most of them just want to keep the status quo. They want us out of the picture, they want our voice silenced, and that's something we really have to work on.
Dead on. So those are two issues that really set us apart, the drug war and ballot access. One thing I'll say about continuing to make a difference, specifically on issues outside of the campaign setting, it's just right. It is so easy to publish a blog post, to start a blog. I'll put in a plug for Will Hammer, who couldn't be here today, ran in 2014 and 2015. He just opened up a blog after the campaign season was over. Mark, Joshua, and I are all on it. Brian's got a place if he ever wants to come. And as far as other issues, one of the things that Bill Redpath talks about, everyone comes to the Libertarian Party for two issues. So for me, that was the drug war and also foreign war. I think there's a place for the Libertarian Party and for libertarian activists to affect our foreign policy, because the old parties are war parties, and that's the end of it.
I just wanted to say regarding ballot access, Virginia is one of only 4 states that over the last 19 years, only the Republican and Democratic parties have been ballot qualified. The others were Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New Hampshire, plus Virginia. And actually, Virginia, it's even worse than that, because it was kind of a fluke thing. If you remember, in 1993, a lot of the people in the panel won't remember this, but a man by the name of Marshall Coleman ran as an independent for governor in 1993 and got over 10% of the vote. And he then gave his ballot access to the Reform Party. And there was a brouhaha, well, can he do this? Because technically he was an independent. And ultimately the State Board of Elections decided not to litigate it and just sort of concede, okay, you can give your ballot access to the Reform Party, because they figured, well, 2 more statewide elections, they'll be off the ballot again, which is exactly what happened. So if you, I don't know how far it would go back if it weren't for that sort of fluky little thing that if the Commonwealth of Virginia had decided to fight it, they might have won that in court. They just said, oh, what the hell, okay. So I mean, it really is. It's a situation where we're among a very small minority of states in terms of the R's and D's only being ballot qualified. But we're running a little long, but I want to ask one final question. Thinking back over your campaign of 2015 and 2014, what was the one most rewarding moment of your campaign?
One most rewarding moment. The Arab American Political Association was holding a forum, a well-attended forum. It's out in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, right off the highway. Giant Marriott ballroom. All of the sitting delegates, all of the sitting senators were in that room, and everyone got a chance to speak. Everyone got, I think, 2 minutes. And I get up there and I say, you know what, I am a medical marijuana patient, and then there are people in this room who would have me put in jail for using my medicine while looking straight at Stacy Kincaid, Fairfax County Sheriff. That was awesome, and to have these people who had clearly never heard of me, but I've never heard of a libertarian either, coming up to me after that event and getting excited, that was the most rewarding.
I'd say the most rewarding was the fact that there are so many people in this room that either helped financially or with their time, or both, to my campaign. I mean, of course, I have one of my greatest supporters, Mr. Montoni. I certainly can't begin to thank you enough for your help. But I'd say the moment that just sort of warmed my heart to such a great extent, I assume many of you know a fellow by the name of John Buckley. Of course, he lives in West Virginia. And he, on the election day, he was actually running for Senate in West Virginia. But they have weird, laws outside the ballot box there. Yeah, he came across the mountain and volunteered for my campaign. And, the fact that someone would come from another state just to help me out, I mean, that meant more to me than you could possibly imagine. I wish he could have been here with us today, but I don't want to single him out because there are so many great people here in this audience, but thank you for that.
By the way, Brian, just to explain, the reason John Buckley was not campaigning outside of a polling place in West Virginia that day is they have a ridiculous law in that state where it's like 300 or 400 feet. You must stay away from the polling place doors by at least 300 feet. It's utterly crazy. They allow no electioneering anywhere near polling places in West Virginia. Here it's 40 feet, which is very reasonable. There it's insane.
So for me, I would say we took a chance. We, when you become a candidate, people say, well, give me a yard sign, and I said, well, I want to do something a little different. I'm not sure what that is yet, but I don't want to spend money on the traditional things that you do as a candidate. I wanted to take advantage of new media, but as I admitted earlier, I'm not very good with social media. But I did have some volunteers come, and what we ended up doing, and it was a ton of fun, but doing many short, 30-second long YouTube videos for all of the issues that I was trying to address, because I knew I wouldn't be able to knock on every single door, and not everybody in my community was going out to the farmer's market, not everybody would see my yard signs. And so we decided to go with YouTube. We did some YouTube advertising, which most memorable for me because I remember coming into work one day and one of my colleagues saying, I saw your advertisement. I was trying to watch this, motorcycle video on YouTube last night, and I saw your face. I see your face 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and there you were. You're in my living room, And I said, yeah. They didn't know that I was running for office because I kind of kept it quiet there. But eventually, everybody found out because they started seeing my video on YouTube, and pretty soon my entire company knew that I was running for office, and they were all supporting me, even though not many of them could actually vote for me. Some of them could and did, but I had people coming up to me and saying, I wish I was in your district. I would totally vote for you. And they offered to help, and a lot of them started giving me, $5, $10 contributions, which certainly helped out pay for those YouTube advertisements, of course. So that was a huge success for my campaign, I think, because we got a little untraditional there and tested the waters, and we actually learned a lot. And I think my volunteers are helping pull all that together.
The most rewarding thing for me was just the response by the voters. Standing outside the polling station on primary day, multiple people recognized me from the previous year. I was at the same polling station I was candidate, and a couple people in particular. One guy said I made him proud to be an American for being out there for what I believe in, and another guy said that he was at one of the speeches I gave and said that I won him over on the spot, and his buddy was there with him, and I won him over, and that feels just great to give your ideas to people, to an open room, and have people respond that way, and to go to speeches or give speeches and stuff. I'm not a great public speaker. I get nervous, and my heart's beating right now. And so to be warmly responded to in that way is just very, very wonderful.
Well, gentlemen, just want you to know we're all proud of you and thank you for what you did in the last year or so. Thank you so much.
Just a quick announcement, dinner, 6 o'clock, Grandstaff and Stein Booksellers. It's 2113 East Main Street. I reserved basically a table for 30. I didn't know what the response would be. You're all more than welcome to join us. It is a fantastic location. Come hang out.
Just as a reminder, the State Central Committee meeting is going to start in a few minutes. That'll be in here, I guess. And in the Rice Boardroom, which is across this hallway here, will be Carla Howell and her Who's Driving game.
The program says Bird Boardroom, or is it?
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, it's right over here, straight across this hall. And I'd like to make a special announcement. Today we had a family visit us, and all 3 members of that family joined the Libertarian Party as a state and national member. And if they are willing, I would like them to stand and identify themselves. One last announcement, if you have the feedback forms, I'm collecting them in this red folder. You may bring them to me, or you may leave them on top of the printer at the registration table. Thank you all for coming.
By the way, if any of you who are registered Virginia voters want to sign an informal petition for free open debates for all candidates, it's an ongoing thing I've been working on for years, and a lot of you have already signed it, but if you haven't, we'd love to have your help on it. Thank you. I'll be by the door.
Hello, excuse me everybody. We're going to switch rooms. We're going to do Who's Driving in here and the State Committee meeting room across the hall in the Rice Boardroom. Okay? Switcheroo. Thank you.
We could apply it to say, in a very simple way, I don't know that there is a way, but very simple way, say, you're protecting someone's rights, applies to that would be
thought like that. I was just curious when you
Yeah, it was nice. And then I gotta get cool up in this joint. Yeah. You shut this one down, saved it on everything?
Yeah.
Gosh, I get cold in it. What did you try it with?
I put it on the Libertarian Party crowd view. It's on the desktop, on the first level.
Okay, so it's asking.
I don't know. Oh.